Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'm going to be going over the stats of the Kelvin Timeline Constitution 2 Intel Cruiser. As always, chapters are listed down below. So the first thing some of you are probably thinking about this ship is, why are we getting another Kelvin Connie when there's already a couple in the game? Well, you see, the two versions of the ship that we have so far, the Heavy Command Cruiser variant and the Legendary one that dropped in the 10th bundle, well, both of those don't have access to all of the skins that were shown in the Kelvin movies. So we have the original Constitution skin there, and then the refit skin. But we do not have the skin that was shown at the very, very end of Star Trek Beyond. And that is exactly what we're getting here with the Constitution 2. And it is fully kit bashable with the existing Kelvin Connie skins, if that's something you're interested in. The issue, though, for this ship is that it is an Infinity promotional pack ship, meaning that it is extremely expensive to acquire, and it is going to only be available for the single character that you get the ship on. So, these Infinity promo pack ships, as I've talked about in the past, they can easily cost you $100 to $150 plus to acquire for a single character. And the issue here for this ship is that the existing versions of the Kelvin Connie are both available as account-wide unlocks for right around that price point. The original Heavy Command Cruiser variant that released back in 2016, that's part of the Muds Into Darkness and Beyond choice pack, and you get it on account-wide unlock if you select the Kelvin Timeline Starship option there, along with getting the D4X, the Talaru, and whatever other ships you pick from that bundle. And for the Legendary one, that's part of the 10th anniversary bundle, which is right around 180 bucks. So you have two bundles that are getting you pretty decent copies of the ship on account-wide unlock. And then you have this new one that is going to cost about that much just to get for a single character. So pricing wise, we're already not off to a great start. And before I get into the stats, I do want to quickly mention that this is going to be dropping on PC later this week on April 11th, and it will be dropping on consoles sometime in May. And heading over to the stats, this has a 5.3 weapon setup, but given that it is an Intel cruiser, they said that it cannot equip dual cannons or dual heavies. It has 4 device slots, it has 4 engineering consoles, 3 science, and 4 tac. So it's not going to be able to run as many ISOMAGs as you would see other cruisers able to run. And something that is a bit annoying here is that this is very comparable to what we see with the legendary version of this ship. The legendary version is an Intel battlecruiser, and it also has a 5.3 weapon setup. But given that it's a battlecruiser versus this new one just being a cruiser, the legendary one is able to run dual cannons or dual heavies. And another notable perk here is that the legendary one, it has 1 less science console, but it has that extra engineering. So the legendary version of this ship is going to be able to run more ISOMAGs than the new promo version that they're adding here later this week. And for the bridge officer seating, this has a commander engineer with Intel, a lieutenant commander universal, a lieutenant commander TAC with pilot, Lieutenant Universal, and an Ensign Science. This is a decent bridge officer setup if you're doing like a Surgical Strikes 3 build. This is going to work very well for that. And the pilot seating isn't as bad as it used to be. Remember, they went through and buffed pilot up a year or so back, and you have some decent pilot abilities that you can use, like Clean Getaway for Uncon, or if you're looking for a damage boost, Fly Her Apart is pretty good. But the issue for this ship is that being a promo ship, you would expect it to be pushing the boundaries a little bit more, to be shaking things up. And as we head over to the ship comparison here, that just isn't the case for this ship. In fact, that exact same spec combo with Intel and Pilot is something that we have seen on the Terran Hydra in the C-Store. The Terran Hydra, of course, is a tactical ship though, so it's going to have a little bit more firepower potential, but still, they are quite comparable, and if you were doing a Surgical Strikes 3 build on the Hydra, you could probably transplant it damn near close 1-to-1 over on the Constitution 2 here. So, again, for a promo ship, I would expect it to be doing something new, And this seems to be doing the same thing as many of these other ships, and in some cases it's doing them worse, given that it doesn't have access to all of the features that you would expect, like the ability to slot dual cannons or the fact that it has no hangar bays. So, looking at this lineup here, the Constitution 2, it's good, but you're not really going to see much of a difference between it and something like the Vengeance, the Bozeman Intel Heavy Frigate, the legendary version of the Kelvin Connie. It just doesn't do anything new, which is the biggest issue that this ship has. And heading over to the accessories, the first here is the Universal Console Proximity Based Anti Opposition Emitter, or PBAOE. This has passives on it for plus 21.4% Cat 1 phaser damage and plus 14.3% flight speed and turn rate. The clicky on this is going to do some area of effect phaser damage based on your speed, and it's going to be up for 20 seconds, centered on yourself. It will create a red bubble, and it has a very neat visual effect.
Good damage, just zipping around.
As you can see there, pretty neat visuals. And for the damage it does, it's only going to do damage to foes within 1 kilometer of you that are in that red bubble, and it'll deal that phaser damage 4 times per second, and that will scale based on your current flight speed. Any smaller enemies that get within that red bubble are going to be vaporized on contact, so things like mines, torpedoes, fighters, and so on. You're also going to get some interesting buffs here. There's immunity to kinetic damage and phaser damage for the 20 seconds this is active, and a plus 50% flight speed and turn rate buff. So it looks interesting for some more niche builds. I think there's going to be some tank builds and PvP builds that really want that immunity to kinetic damage and phaser damage. There's going to be some of you interested in it for it just instantly vaporizing mines, torps, fighters, and so on. But my concern here with the top bit, the part where it does damage, is that the numbers that we saw when Kale was showing that off on screen were not super impressive. If you look here, you can see when he gets within 1 kilometer of this carrier, you can see it's doing like low 1000s for when it's getting hits in. So not the most impressive with regards to the damage. The other parts of it, realistically, you're not going to care about that in most content, but some of you are going to have some niche use cases where, like that immunity is going to be really cool for you. But overall, I just don't think that it's worth going out and picking this ship up, just for this console. And the other thing is, too, with the amount of damage it does, that scales with current flight speed. And if you're doing PvE and you're trying to maximize your damage output, the optimal way to play is to usually sit in a spot where you have maximum weapons uptime on your targets, and moving around constantly is just generally not the best thing to do in that environment. So meta-wise, probably not going to be anything to worry about. And next up is the Starship Trait Gravitational Nexus. This is a Sci-Torp Starship Trait on a ship that you would not want to do either science or torpedoes on. Yeah, that's certainly an interesting one right there. So this thing is going to create an artificial gravitational nexus for 30 seconds. They did not show us how it's triggered. We don't know if it's a clicky, like Temporal Surge, or if it's triggered by you hitting like a grav well, but this can go off once every 45 seconds, and it will last for 30 seconds. While it's up, allies within 5 kilometers of the Nexus are going to gain a plus 20% flight speed and turn rate buff, plus 20% Cat 2 bonus all damage with exotic damage abilities, and plus 20% Cat 2 bonus all damage with projectile weaponry. Again, it doesn't make any sense at all why this trait is on this ship. It feels like this is a trait that they had set up for something else, and they just decided to grab a random trait to put on this ship. It doesn't make a ton of sense. We don't have any information here telling us how the Nexus is created, but this is something that looks like it'd be more of a support focused trait if you're trying to buff up like a Torp or EPG build in like Hive Space Elite. this is probably not a trait that most of you need to worry about. It just really confuses the hell out of me because, like, why is there a side torp trait on a ship like this? An Intel cruiser where most people running it are going to be running Surgical Strikes 3. If people were going to try to do science on this, they'd want to be able to run cannons, which guess what? This ship doesn't have access to. It I don't understand. So yeah, just some random trait that they were working on at some point that they grabbed to put on this thing. I don't know why, but it's there. And final thoughts, I think that the Kelvin Timeline Constitution 2 Intel Cruiser is quite underwhelming. I think it's a ship that you can very easily skip over. I don't think it's going to have really any meta impact for the vast majority of players. Some PvP players and some tank players might enjoy the console. The trait might have use for the 10 people actually doing like really high-end coordinated supported runs in Hive Space Elite. But the ship itself, just really not that impressive at all. And it's quite clear that they're hoping to sell this just based on the skin alone. They want people that like the Kelvin Constitution to go out and spend 100 to 150 bucks to get this ship per character that they want the skin on. The ship itself is a pretty mediocre cruiser, and with promotional tier ships, you would expect them to have a feature set that is just really appealing, that really stands out against the C-Store and Lobby and Lockbox ships out there. But in this case, the feature set on this is that it's worse than even some of the C-Store ships we've had in the past couple of years. So really not that impressive. If they'd made this like a flight deck carrier, this thing would have sold like crazy. But instead, they just made it a generic Intel cruiser and removed the ability for it to have dual cannons on it. They gave it no hangar bay slots. They didn't really give it anything good from a meta perspective when it comes to its unique features. So yeah, meta-wise, I think something you can easily skip. The console on it might be fun for some niche things, and some PvPers may like that immunity that it has for kinetic and phaser. The Starship Trait here feels like something that they just randomly drew out of a hat to put on a ship. Doesn't feel like it belongs here at all. And yeah, the ship itself just doesn't really do anything new. So, thank you, Cryptic, for making the new promo ship not something that we all need to run out and pick up. I think it's an okay ship if you want to fly it around. You can certainly put a really nice surgical strikes build on it if you want to do so. It's just that it's not doing anything new or better than the existing platforms out there. And that's going to be it for today. So as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them down below. And my question for all of you is, what would have had to have been different about this ship to have made it appealing to you? Would it have needed to have had a different secondary specialization, a different primary spec for you? Would it have been enough for this to have had access to run dual cannons and had a hangar bay or two? Let me know what you think about it down below. And as always, thank you to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. See you guys around.